I knew we would get there. And I think that's one of the things, like, I feel
Yep.
like Jesse and I were so confident in where this business was
Yep.
going, but we weren't in a rush to get there. We wanted to do it right.
She just sold her company. She sat in a room full of men negotiating the biggest deal of her lifetime. Wait, she sold for how much? I can't even believe she managed to get double her valuation. Let's keep this just between us.
Welcome, Michelle, to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to have you here. I absolutely love what you built. I feel like honored that you're with me today. You don't even know the deep dive that I've done in you and how much I love your story and all of it. So I hope you're ready.
I am a little nervous now that you said that, but no, I'm super excited. And it's pouring rain here right now in Southern California. And I just like ran in soaking wet. And I'm like, okay, wonder if this is on camera.
You're more. Well, here's the thing. We keep it real on here. Look at my face. I do not know why I cannot ever like manage to coordinate interviews when I actually put a face on. But it's good because I think
You look
apparently
adorable.
the internet has informed me that they like authentic Carrie versus like done up Carrie. But
Fabulous. Well,
whatever.
hopefully you'd be like authentic Michelle.
Yes, well, they love authentic Michelle. I love authentic Michelle, and you built a brand that was very authentic. Just to put together that little twist. So, for those of you who don't know, although I have already said this to you in the intro, Michelle is the co-founder of Beyond Yoga, a little brand you may have heard of that ended up going to Levi's. So, let's talk about this a little bit. So, tell me about life pre Beyond Yoga. Who was Michelle before Beyond Yoga?
So, pre Beyond Yoga, I mean, all right, the backstory that I feel like helps it like kind of inform how Beyond Yoga came to be
Yep.
is I grew up on the East Coast. I had a very loving family. My dad was an entrepreneur, and so I definitely got the entrepreneurial bug from my dad. I always envisioned that one day I would help run his chain of music stores, and that was kind of the dream. But sadly, I watched my dad lose his business. And it was probably when I was in high school. And, it was just a matter of being in the music industry. And he was actually like, originally, he was like in record stores and then it was CDs and
Of
the
course.
whole rise of MP3s and Napster and everything like that just really shifted the landscape and didn't make it, it just wasn't like a viable option for him to continue his business. So I watched my dad build his business for many years, and then I watched him lose it, which was really painful to watch. And I think definitely informed a lot of, who I am and how I've gone about my entrepreneurial endeavor. And then the other part that really informed me was my mom. And my mom is amazing. She's smart. She's beautiful. She's everything, but she always struggled with her self-image. And that was really hard for me to watch too. And I didn't understand why she was kind of holding herself to this one size fits all beauty and like everybody has to be a tall, thin blonde in order to be considered beautiful. And, that's not who she was, but that didn't make her any less amazing and beautiful. And so, um, throughout my life, I saw a lot of women who I adore just not see themselves the way I saw them as the incredibly smart, beautiful, like amazing people that they are. And I realized everyone's kind of holding themselves to this unrealistic standard.
Yeah.
Fast forward, I go to college. I go to the University of Florida. I studied graphic design. I saw some of my very best friends struggle with eating disorders and, the same thing. Fast forward, I moved to New York and I got into publishing and I worked at People Magazine and Harper's Bazaar. And when I was there, I saw kind of firsthand the photoshopping that goes on. And I realized, well, this is really part of why people are feeling the way they're feeling because we're, celebrating these celebrities, but we're not even showing who they really are. We're kind of, making them seem more perfect than they are. And they're already, amazing for their accomplishments, but now we're like turning them into these like unachievable, um, beauty icons. And it's just setting a really hard expectation for everyone else.
Right.
Um,
You're torturing yourself to achieve a goal that is not even real in the first place. It's like, yes, 100%.
exactly.
Hmm.
So, anyways, then when I was at People Magazine, I started my first entrepreneurial endeavor, which is called Unsweetened. And I started drawing women of all shapes and sizes. And I wanted to draw them as they are, the unsweetened version of themselves. Yeah, or I called it the like non-sugar coated version. And I was like, but celebrating them and showing them how beautiful they are. And this started all because I had like one of my best friends, it was her birthday, and I had no money and I had nothing to give. So I was like, I'm going to make her something. And so I made the first one was of my best friend Lauren. And then the second one was of my other best friend Rachel. And then people started asking me if I would do, versions of their friends. And then I started selling these t-shirts. And then I started turning it into a business and started selling them to wholesale and and that's kind of how I taught myself a little bit how the wholesale business works. And then I decided to move. I left New York and I moved to California. And when I moved to California, condensed version of all of this, I went to this trade show where I was going to sell the unsweetened
Yeah.
t-shirts.
Yeah.
I met this amazing guy, Brad, who kind of changed my life because he introduced me to the woman who became my business partner, Jody.
Yeah.
And Jody and I, started working together. Originally, I was coming on to help her with, like trademark and, just some of the business side of things because her idea was beyond yoga. And then as, I was listening to Jody on the phone talking to the designer that she was working with, she was getting really frustrated because the designer didn't understand her vision. And I was like, I got you. I was like, send me that file. I know how to do all of these things. My background's in graphic design. I love to draw. I can do this on the computer. And so she sent me the sketches. And then that weekend I was really nerdy and I started working on it and I like changed them. And then I had ideas of like, oh, this would be really cool for her. And so I put that in and then I sent it back to her. And then the next morning she called me and she left me a voicemail and it was like, our relationship is about to change. And pretty much from that point on, Beyond Yoga became the focal point of everything. And I spent the next 18 and a half years building, growing, and leading Beyond Yoga. Um, and I'm super proud of what we created. And yeah, I sold the company, it's been about three and a half
Yeah.
years ago now,
Yeah.
to Levi Strauss. And I'm really honored that, a company like Levi's would be interested in something that we built. And um, yeah, so some of the things that are really unique about my journey and our journey is, we never took on any additional funding outside of that initial investment.
Mhm.
Her dad actually he really invested in Jody, because he believed in her and how passionate she was about this mission.
Yeah.
And, and I took that very seriously that this was like,
You had an investor and this
we had
was,
an,
yeah.
we had
Yeah.
an investor and we needed
Yeah.
to make him extremely proud. And I knew that it almost was like more important than a normal investor because it was her father. And so it was such an important relationship. And so I wasn't ever going to let, you know, let anything go wrong with that baby. And so, but we grew the business very strategically and thoughtfully, and we never got out in front of our skis. And, we did it all, self-funding and, with lines of credit and with, you know, guaranteed loans. But, we did it all with still retaining all of the equity.
Oh,
So
holy cow. Oh my gosh, what a story. Well, okay. I have a lot of questions. Can we start with dad for a second? When
that.
you, yes, your dad, when you are young and I'm sure, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit within you and you see him as the success in this, by the way, extremely cool industry, I would imagine, as you're growing up. I mean, that is like, for those of you who are listening that are the they probably don't even know MP3, like pre-streaming era, right? You barely know Napster. Like, we used to have record stores. There was Tower Records, and you would walk in and you would go, and it was an experience, and then it turned to CDs. So you're in this cool industry, and then you watch it. That's the type of industry that was disrupted so quickly that there's sort of nothing you could do from that. I want to know, how did that impact you? I know it obviously had a huge impact, but did it make you more risk averse? Did it scare you around entrepreneurialism, or did it show you the power of resiliency? Like, where did it play out for you? Probably all the things, but tell me.
A bit of all of the things. I thought that it would have made me a little bit more risk adverse
Mm-hmm.
than I am. I thought that they would make me not want to be an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, and that I would, go a more traditional path,
Yeah.
but that just apparently wasn't in my cards.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that I think it just made me very cautious. Like, there is a large part of me that is just naturally very optimistic
Yeah.
and believes anything is possible. And I always think that just the best situation, like, I always just think the best is going to come of a
Yep.
situation. Um, and I think that that gave me the reality to help ground me a little and be like, don't forget.
Right.
Don't forget what it was like to lose your home as a kid, to think all along that you were going to be able to go to like whatever college you were able to get into, and
Mm.
then realize like, oh, I've got a very different set of parameters now, and it's now about where you can get a scholarship, or it just changed my perspective. And I think I'm grateful for that, because it made me, even though, at Beyond Yoga, I really feel like we were doing great from the beginning. Like, I feel
Yeah.
proud of every single year. I was always nervous it would go away.
Yeah.
And I was, like my husband, I ended up hiring my husband, Jesse, to join me, I don't know how many years ago, 10 or 15 years ago.
Yep.
But when he joined, he was like, "You're doing amazing. You can spend more money. Like, you should be investing more." And I was always like a little hesitant, and I actually am very grateful that I had him on my team and pushing me, because I obviously trust him implicitly,
Yep.
but he also like pushed me where I think I might have like still held back a little, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. I was thinking when I was listening to your story about, the not raising capital, how seriously that you took Jody's dad's investment. Like, I was like, oh, I could hear that too being tied to it. Like, sort of the risk of, like, if you raise capital, you could let those investors down. And I hear like almost like a hyper independence because of it. And like that to me is it's so interesting in your story. And because you were in an industry where raising capital would be sort of normal. It's not like you were a services business and like, it's kind of standard. Most people I talk to in your space or in apparel or any, they raise funds. And the fact that you bootstrapped it pretty much, aside from the initial investment, is really incredible. So when Beyond Yoga started, it's very different from what people see today. So people see post Levi's, that you have retail locations, you have all of this stuff. But before that, it was mostly wholesale, right? So talk to me about like the start, how it started.
Okay. So in the beginning, it was
Yeah.
mostly wholesale.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that dramatically different today
Okay.
than when we sold the company in 2021.
Right.
So
Right.
I think like it hasn't changed so dramatically since the sale. The biggest shift is what you're talking about,
Yeah.
is that we opened retail stores.
Yeah.
But our wholesale business was how we got started. And I'm a big proponent of wholesale because I
Yeah.
think that it's a great way, if you can find the right partners who will believe in you and bring your brand in, it's a great way to build trust with your consumer. And I feel like it's marketing that pays you. And, like I think it's phenomenal when someone will see us when they're on vacation, when they're at a Four Seasons, and then they'll see us when they're at their local Pure Bar, or they'll see us when they are going camping and they're shopping for things and they go into REI. It's like, oh, wow, all of these, places believe in this product. I think I can too, and so I think it lends just more credibility to your brand when you're in these great retailers, and then people are seeing you over and over again in different locations, and then that heightens your brand awareness. So I think that's really important. And then once we had that, that strong foundation of wholesale, we wanted to go direct to consumer. And I remember initially being really concerned that our wholesale partners
Yeah.
would feel like, we were doing something wrong to them.
Right.
And I never wanted to do anything to like disrupt that part of the business or ever make my partners feel like I didn't value them, because my wholesale partners were so important to me. And my team would kind of be frustrated sometimes because I would always put the wholesale customers first before D2C.
Yeah.
And, um, you know, we would never like not ship an order complete. Like I'd rather like, pull from what we had planned for ourselves to
Right.
make sure that, the yoga studio down the corner, on the corner had what they needed, because I felt like we made a promise to them.
Right.
So
Right.
that was really important.
I want to ask, I have two things that I wanted to ask you from that. The first was, tell me about your first wholesale order. Like, how did you get it? Where did you go? Give me that.
I think our very first wholesale order was an account called Drishti, which was a yoga studio in Santa Barbara. And it's funny because we just had a great relationship with them. And it turned like we always remembered the anniversary of that sale. And
Mm,
so we would send them flowers every year. So
so-
that was a really great relationship, and I was sad because I think they closed their
oh,
doors during COVID. But that was a very long relationship. And I mean, every wholesale order that we got kind of came in a different route. Um, some of them came from connections that we had with different people. Some of them came from shops that we knew, but we also hired sales reps pretty early on. And I had just the most phenomenal group of people helping us in the beginning. And eventually that morphed into, once we got to a certain size, we're like, we really need to have some in-house people.
right.
And then I tried to hybrid it as long as I could. And eventually we just ended up with everybody in-house. And but I'm still so grateful to that initial sales team, because they were the ones who were able to get us into all of the small, yoga studios and pure bars and partners that like really built that authentic connection.
Right.
And that then later on we were able to get into Nordstrom and I remember going to Zappos for the first time and pitching, and I remember that meeting when we landed Nordstrom too. I remember opening Equinox. Like I remember so clearly some of these really amazing monumental accounts that changed things for us.
It sounds like it started studio by studio though. Like when I'm hearing the story, like I can really picture the whole thing, like going one by one and then starting to bring on sales reps and hiring them slowly. I can see the whole journey. I'm interested. So Beyond Yoga is known for its inclusive, it's all bodies, it's like everything. I love everything about it. When you started, was how women talked about the idea of like inclusive sizing and all bodies, was it different from how it is today? And if so, how did that impact? Were you early to that discussion? How did that work for you?
I think we were very early to that discussion.
Mhm.
Um, I will credit Jody with the fact that she, it was really her vision, and she was like, I want to make clothing for women of all shapes and
Right.
sizes. And when I heard this idea,
Yeah.
I was like, I am all in on that. And then even when we started, making we had our first website was very, I don't know, how should I put it? It was very rudimentary.
Yeah.
And I remember, we made a commitment and we said, we're never gonna Photoshop a woman's body. We might use the same picture and like tweak the color of the garment so, you don't have to reshoot it, but I'm never going to, change any bit of that woman's form. And let's show people, you know, real bodies and how they're wearing it. And in the beginning, we couldn't show it as much as we wanted to.
Right.
Um, but as we were more successful and as we had more marketing dollars to put into photo shoots, we were able to have multiple different body types and multiple different women of different ethnicities being shot at the same time. And so what we were planning and what we felt was the ethos, was more visible in the marketing. But I think we were very early to that. I can't think
You
of.
you had to be,
Yeah.
because I'm just, when I think back and I'm hear how long you've been in business, like did you ever see those Instagram reels or TikToks about like, I wonder why Gen X women have issues with their bodies, and like every time it's like all the old shows where it's like do all the fat jokes and everything, like it's unbelievable. So you were very, very early, I think, in that space, and that is so much to your credit, because it removes it from being like a marketing message and it makes it truly authentic to who you were as a brand. Like it's done now almost like oh, we have to do this for marketing. It's
No, it was why we started.
yeah,
And, you know, Jody and I both wore the clothing. I mean, I'm wearing Beyond
I know.
Yoga right
Yeah.
now.
Yes.
Like we wear it every day. And it's, we made it for us and for our friends. And we wanted everyone to feel good in the clothing. And that was of the utmost importance. And that's also why we were crazy about fit and fabric. And we people would come join the company and they'd be like, people don't usually spend this much time fitting their products. And most people don't do a full size run before they go
Yeah.
everything on other people. Like we did, we were wear testing every size for every product and making tweaks by the size. Like we took it very seriously.
Incredible. Now, how early from when you started did you like really get traction, would you say? Like, did you know right away that this was it? It was going to be a success. It'd take a few years. Where in the journey did you really like start to feel like you knew that
Feel
this
like
was going
very
somewhere?
early I knew, but the first year, like the first full year we were in business, we did $1 million, which I felt was pretty good for year one. Then we doubled that,
Mhm.
like we just kept each year. I was like, we did 1 million, we did 2 million, we did 4 million. Then I think we had like a slight setback, with the financial crisis. And but I think it's good sometimes to have those setbacks because it makes you, when things are good, sometimes I think it's good to have setbacks
Okay.
because when you're just on this like up and, up into the right trajectory, sometimes you feel like everything's so good that you might not look at all the little details. And I think it, I think that when we did have one year where,
That's right.
you know, I think we went backwards and I think we lost $1 million. And that was really startling. And then I was like, all right,
Mhm.
we've got to figure out what's going on. And I was like, got real into like every detail. And, up until that point, I feel like I was always very into
Yeah.
the product and the sourcing and the manufacturing and the marketing and the images, but I was not able to I wasn't as involved in what was going on the on the finances and like looking at every detail of that. We actually had like a third party that was managing all of, they called it, they were like our business advisors, and they were managing all, paying all the bills and coding all of the invoices. And I was like, I need to really dig into this. And so I started looking into that and I realized, oh, they're coding things wrong. They're putting this in cost of goods sold, and that's not where it should be. And we're actually more profitable than we
Right.
thought we were. And, and it just
Yes.
made me realize
Yes.
how important that side of the business is. And then we ended up taking that in-house, and um and that I think was a really important time for us too, and helped us grow and just have better controls over what was going on.
I think it's so important. It's so important to like have an understanding of your numbers and not, I mean, some parts of it can be outsourced, right? Like you don't necessarily go into business to do your coding, but you should know what is where and how it impacts for sure. Okay, so it sounds like you knew pretty early that it was going to work and you were growing and then you had a little bit of a dip and then you grew again. And then you get like, is this true? You get a cold email or a cold LinkedIn message from Levi's. Can you
Okay, so
explain
we
this
were
to me? And about
much
what
further
size were
along.
you?
I mean,
Where was
that
the
just
business when you get
happened
this
in
message?
2020. So, at that point we
Okay.
had 70 employees. We
Yeah.
were extremely profitable, and,
Okay.
we had a very, very healthy business, great distribution, incredible website that was.
The D2C stuff was amazing. All of it was now running because is now several years later. I mean, you're at a point.
We were 16 years into the business at that point. So
Yeah.
things were really hitting. We were doing monthly drops.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
we had
You
new
were grown
colors
up.
of
You're
our
a
famous
grown up
base
business
dye
at this
coming
point.
out
You're a
every
grown up
month.
business. You've got
It
through
was
the teenage
it
years.
was
Here you
incredible.
are. And then in comes a cold message.
In comes a LinkedIn message. And it's funny because I don't look
Okay.
at LinkedIn that often. And at
Mhm.
that point, I didn't look at LinkedIn ever. Like I was the worst at LinkedIn. But for some reason, I saw this message come through. And one of the women on the Levi's team had reached out, and she, just said she was interested in a conversation. For some reason, I
Yeah.
thought that they were interested in a collaboration. That's how I thought it. I think they like pitched it at first, and so I was like, how cool would that be? Like Levi's is the coolest brand. I would
Mhm.
love nothing more
Yeah.
than to, be associated with them, and what a reach, right? So I end up having a call with, her name was Lauren, and we just hit it off,
Yeah.
and we talked for,
Of course.
over an hour, just about how our brands were so aligned. Levi's is all about
Yeah.
authenticity, and, being your authentic self, and Beyond Yoga is all about, inclusivity. And we're like, this is such a match made in heaven. And she was like, if you're interested, I'd love to
Hmm.
introduce you to our CFO. And that's like the first moment where I was like,
For a
hmm,
partnership, right? A partnership
you know,
not
that's
CFO.
not the
That would
next
not be
step
like a
for
collab.
a,
Not happening.
yeah,
Right.
for, right. Like
Right.
that would be maybe somebody from the marketing department, not necessarily, going the finance route first. So, anyways, I ended up talking to Harmeet, and we had a great conversation, and he's a, a lovely guy. And we hit it off as well. And he was very transparent with me. He said, we would love to do a collaboration. We are learning about
Yep.
the market. We're thinking about potentially creating activewear. Um, so we might want to, do a collaboration, and then, that might be a direction that we go. And he was like, we're either kind of gonna build or buy. And I said to him, I and I was not thinking like, oh, buy us, but I was like, I would highly
Yeah,
recommend
for sure.
you just buy someone who knows what they're doing, because I have seen so many brands, large organizations try to all of a sudden like get into active and, you
Sure.
know, shrink it and pink it, or just throw out leggings under, whatever brand. And I've seen them come and go, and people don't understand the nuance of it, and they don't understand the brand loyalty.
Clearly.
And
Clearly you did. So how, well,
he
first,
listened to
I guess I want to know, had you thought about exiting before this?
me.
Like, was this something that came to you and you just hadn't really thought about it before, or had you been considering it or thinking about it?
So there had been people who had come to us over the years. Like, we were approached many times. I remember a company that
Right.
offered to buy us,
Okay.
back in
Yeah.
2008 for like $1 million. And I was like,
Right.
so insulted. I was like, how could they think that that would work?
Yeah.
And then I remember at some point somebody offering us 15, like early days, somebody offering us 15 million. And I
Yep.
was like, no, like we're going to go somewhere. And I think when we were around 20 million, we decided that we were going to go and, maybe bring on investors. And we went and we hired a banker, and we did the whole, dog and pony show. We went to New York, and, it was hard though, because, Jesse and I were running the business and the day to
Yes.
day of the business.
Being-
And then we got pulled out to go to all of these pitches, and
It
relationship,
is. Yes.
building things. And it's very distracting from the business. And but it was really educational for me, and it certainly showed me, because I hadn't been thinking about fundraising before that. It showed me, like, everyone was asking the exact same questions, and they were like, oh, well, how come your D2C isn't larger? Why do you have so much in wholesale? People really value D2C, and that's where you're going to get a higher multiple. And I was like, I know,
Yes.
but wholesale's really important too. And it's interesting to see how that's like kind of coming full circle now. Um, but people
Yep.
wanted to know why, like, we were literally investing every dollar back into the business. And that was really important to us. That's how we were growing.
Reinvesting.
And
Right.
people were like, well, we want to see profit. And I was like, well, we're just, investing. We're reinvesting. And they were like, we really want to see that profit. And I was like, but you see the growth. But, okay, if we were going to go this route, we would. But I just don't think people saw us.
It's so interesting because I think I know the answer to this. And this answer often varies based on how big someone grew a business. When they're sitting there doing that to you and saying, oh, it should be more profit, and you're sitting there grow, did you doubt yourself? Did you have doubt, or were you like, fuck no?
No, no.
Mhm.
I knew we would get there. And I think that's one of the things, like, I feel
Yep.
like Jesse and I were so confident in where this business was
Yep.
going. But we weren't in a rush to get there. We wanted to do it right. We cared like so much about
Yep.
our team and the business that we were building along the way. So, we always would say like, oh, we could have like really high peaks, and then maybe we can't match it the
Yep.
next year. But we don't want to do that. We'd rather go slower and have steady growth so we can grow as a team. And we don't want to have massive layoffs and then rebuild and then cut the team. Like, that's not productive. That's not going to serve anyone. And so we really tried to have steady state growth. And some of my wholesale partners would get frustrated with me because I wouldn't let them grow as fast as they
That's
wanted
right.
to.
You controlled it. So in order to be able to control the way you ran the business too.
People, I remember multiple meetings sitting in these, high level meetings with great retail partners, and they're like, we believe in Beyond Yoga. We are going to really put all of our dollars behind you guys and plus next year. And I was like, I love that and I appreciate that. But I'd rather walk before we run. Let's do a small test. Let's make sure this works. I understand that's a huge brand initiative for you guys as an organization, but let's make sure that the woman who is shopping for that
Right.
product knows she can find it in your shop. We don't want to like overbuy, and people were like, who are you that you're telling us to
What?
like keep.
Why are you thinking about us like that?
They're like,
Yes, it's amazing.
they were like, well, why are you telling us to write smaller POs? And I always told my sales team, and they were phenomenal, but I always told them I'd rather chase orders and rush to fill in than have anybody feeling like they were sitting on a ton of inventory. Like that's my biggest nightmare, is walking into one of our accounts and somebody being like, we just have so much. Like,
Oh, yes. I see you so well. This is about the your worst nightmare is letting people down. You don't want to let Jody's dad down. You don't want to let your customers down with the obsession with
never.
it. You cannot let the wholesale partners down. That's really integrity, very, very important piece of who you are. This is, oh my God, amazing, incredible. So wait, so when Levi's comes to you, you talk to the CFO, okay, you're right. You say you should buy versus build. So this is the opposite of when you were like at 20 million and you run a process. This is Levi's comes to you. How do you handle that? Do you hire somebody to help you through it, or you guys do it yourselves?
So Jesse and I handled this whole thing kind of on our own. We had an amazing lawyer,
Good. Of course.
you know,
You need perfect lawyer. Yes.
yes, Goody, from K&L Gates. He's the best.
Oh, love Goody.
He's the
Love Goody.
best. And the reason he's the best is not only because he's so good at what he does, but he also has a background in tax law. So he
Yes.
understands things from, all
Yes.
angles. He's
Yes.
very commercial. So he knows that the goal is to get the deal done. So
Yes.
when I would be having a conniption over like some tiny detail, he was able to calm me down and
Talk you
say,
off a ledge. Yeah. Yeah.
hey, let's talk about this. Like, does that really matter in the scheme
Right.
of things? And I was like,
Right.
okay,
Right. Sort of the opposite of a lawyer who wants to fight over every little thing. Like, sounds like he did a good job talking you off a ledge there. That's great.
He was wonderful. Having Jesse by my side, it was completely invaluable. I would never have been able to do this without him. He's so organized, and he was my COO, CFO. And you have to imagine that this all was taking place during COVID. So it's work from home. So nobody on our team knew what was going on. And we didn't want them to, because
Right.
I was like, the odds of this actually happening
Right.
felt so small.
Right.
And I was like, if we tell people about this and get them excited and they're pulling data for us, it's going to distract them from the day to day.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, it's going to be a disappointment to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're like, we'll just figure this out. And Jesse's so organized. He had every piece of data, ready to go. And so we did all of it over like Teams and Zoom. And we'd be on a call, just the two of us. And then they'd say, ask for a certain number. And I'd be like, that's a great question. Let me double check and I'll get that to you. And then Jesse would be like, I just put it in the chat. You guys have it. And it was so perfect. But Jesse's background is in finance and operations, and he was a banker, or not a banker in this sense, but he worked in on Wall Street, and so I just feel like he was prepared for this.
Prepared. He was prepared.
Yes.
Did you guys close over Zoom when you like closed the deal, or did you do it in person over Zoom? I did too
Mhm.
when I sold 21. Yeah. So you closed in 21 also then? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I mean, we were super fortunate. The timing of everything, hindsight,
Yeah.
it's 2020, but like we just happened to be at the peak of the market, and it was a really great time, and nobody could have known I know what was coming and what was, how things were going to change, but it was really phenomenal. And it was awesome to, be acquired by a partner that is, you know, it's Levi's. Like, I
Right.
don't think we would have sold to anyone else, but the brand values were so aligned. And it's such a cool, iconic company. It is like the company in retail. And I felt like it was going to be something great for all of our team members, to like, we always took a lot of pride in having really great benefits, but they were they were even able to match what we had. And then one of the things I always worried was like, oh, we're not, I want to always be able to offer people career growth. And we told our team, constantly, like, I hope you want to stay with us forever, but if there's a point where you want to go on and do something else and we don't have that option here, just come to us and tell us, because we know lots of people in the
Yes.
industry and maybe we can
We'll
help
help
you
you.
find that next thing. But when you are part of an organization like Levi's, there's no end to the
Roles you can
possibility
have or
of
growth you
growth
can do. It's
that
the
they could have,
level.
yeah, while being still part of the organization. Instead of
Totally.
like parting ways, we could just, move up to our parent company. So there were so many things that just made it feel like a great opportunity. And then, then my whole team, came with me. And so that was really great too, because when we had the sale, Jody and Jesse and I owned, and Jody's dad owned, 100% of the business.
Yep.
We hadn't done an equity share, but we always, Jesse and I talked about it all the time. If anything ever happened, what would we do? And so, we put together this whole spreadsheet and we mapped out like how long people had been there. And
Yep.
we just did this thing, and it was amazing. Every single person who was with us at that time, even if they had joined 3 days before, every person participated in the upside. And there were people who, you know were making, 60, $70,000, who ended up getting, life-changing money, like able to send their kids to college, able to buy a house, like, and it was really cool to have that give back moment. But I said to everyone, I was like, I'm giving this to you for what you have done. This
Right.
is not a bribe to get you to
Right.
come with me.
Right.
And if this changes your vision and makes it so you're like, I don't want to come to work tomorrow, that's okay. And I'm not mad. Like,
Right.
don't feel like you owe me anything. It would be amazing to get to continue to work together, and I hope you come with us, but this is separate. I just want to make sure we're clear about that.
Oh, that
And,
is amazing.
but everybody
Incredible.
came. Everyone came, and and that's something that is really, really special to me.
So let's talk about you go to Levi's, you spend some time there, and then you're bringing in a CEO and it's time to go,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Because I
That's,
had been the CEO for, the majority of, I mean, I was the CEO, the only CEO up until I left.
I mean, Michelle, this is decades of your life now, right? So this is your identity is so tied up with this.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that change and how that went for you and how you navigated it.
You know, it was definitely harder than I expected.
Yeah.
And I knew it would be hard, but I think that, like I mentioned earlier, like, I'm this optimist and I always picture things being a certain way.
Mhm.
I think I thought that I was gonna like come into work the next day and like bring everybody coffee, and like I was still gonna be part of it. And then someone gave me very good advice, and they said, you know, the first day that you're not part of the company, you're going to be sad. Like, you should wake up on vacation. And I took that advice and I went to Mexico.
Good.
And I woke up the next morning, and it was weird. There were literally no phone calls, no one emailing. And then I wanted to email everybody and be like, "How's it going?" And then
You're
I
helping.
realized, yeah, and then I realized that is so like confusing to my team. Like, that would be super micromanagey. And even though I know I'm coming from a good place,
Right.
like that would be confusing. And I need to like step back and allow my team to bond with their new leader.
Yeah.
And I can't like opine on everything that's happening because that's going to undermine, Nancy, the new leader. And I was like, I just need to like keep a friendly distance for a little bit and give them time to heal. And what I didn't realize was also give myself time to heal.
Yeah.
So that was hard. And, it was funny. Like, I never had a social media presence. I was always super under the radar. Anything I ever did, in the community, any speaking events, I always gave the credit to Beyond Yoga.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I'm not a part of this anymore.
Now it's just
So
you.
it's just me, and nobody knows who I am.
Yep.
So I actually like created a public Instagram, Michelle.Whaler. And I'm so shy. You won't see that on a one-on-one, but in
Yeah.
general, like
No, I get it. I get
I
it.
don't love public speaking. I don't love,
So it's a new chapter. It's a new chapter and a new phase for you.
absolutely. But it's been the best year. Hard, but amazing. Like I have two small children. I've got a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. And now I get to walk them to school every day. I get to volunteer at school. I'm room mom for both of them, which sometimes I still mess up, even though I'm not working.
Oh
And
my
I don't know how
God.
full-time working moms are pulling this all off, but lots of respect. But I'm, getting to lean in a lot more there. I've gotten to, be involved in charity events. I've been able to, spend a lot of time volunteering. My favorite thing that I've been doing is working with the female founder community. And I've been just talking to so many amazing women and just I don't know, just mentoring or being just being helpful where I can, whether that's just listening to somebody, whether it's making a connection. If somebody wants advice, I'm always willing to give it.
Yeah.
With the caveat of this is just my opinion. But
Oh, Michelle. Well, let me tell you, your story is so inspiring and beautiful. And I feel so lucky that my audience gets to hear it today because you're just such a light of, but you are right about the positivity and the optimism, like that shines through. And I'm so excited to see what if, even if you just are room mom for the next, 10 years, I can watch you be room mom. Like you're awesome.
well,
You're
thank
doing
you.
great,
Thank you.
great, great, great stuff. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And people should follow you on Michelle Whaler, Michelle.Whaler. Yeah.
WHLER.
WAHLER, Whaler, not Waller. Don't forget it.
Exactly.
Don't forget it. Michelle, thanks for coming on the show today. You are awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm so excited about what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.